Hello, I am the darkness, and this is something I've thought of doing for quite some time, but here we have an example of somebody who is enjoying life to a certain extent. We have a person who is enjoying watching TV, flipping through channels, hanging out with friends, if you want to call them that, um, people that they find comfortable, um, and enjoy aspects of life. Um, Maybe they enjoy engaging in recreational things to a certain degree. Some may take it to a certain point. Some may take it to you know, an extent that seems a little bit extreme, but they're still managing. As they say, a functional alcoholic or a functional, whatever. Um, but you have this person. It could be someone you know, it could be yourself, it could be someone you've heard of, whatever the case is. And they're seeming as though everything is going right for them, as best as you can perceive it to be. And then they find themselves in a position where they're questioning, what am I doing? Why am I here? Is this what I should be doing? And part of that could be them trying to, you know, disregard the facts of life, no pun intended, and they're using different things to try to push themselves into a different position. Alcohol, drugs, food, um, anything that you can kind of put as a way of distracting yourself. Again, different people sharing in the same kind of habits that you share, so you find yourself comfortable engaging with them because you feel a sense of we are the same. We have the same build. We have the same path. We're both engaging in these things, and it seems as though we're functioning and that we're managing and that we're handling it, even if it comes to a point like this where you are kind of, falling over yourself, but you're still, again, managing it just as they are. They probably stumbled and, had an embarrassing time doing it, but they know that it's not as bad. Um, don't beat yourself up. Don't beat them up. Don't kick them while they're down. It's one of those things where, although yes, it is a functional managing status, it's something that everyone has to build their own time through. It's something that you have to realize even for yourself, that you may come across a certain thing that does happen the same way. Maybe you know, watch TV to a certain extent that prevents you from doing other things. Maybe it, play games to a certain extent that push you too far. Maybe, whatever the case is, and I'm not saying that there aren't certain things that you can look at and say, oh, well, it's a positive thing, like working out too much. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can put yourself in a position where it can become so much of your life that you lose a sense of who you are because you're dedicating yourself to something that is so avid, um, that you feel is the only defining thing about you, or maybe it's trying to acquire as much money as possible. There's nothing wrong with that innately, but there is something to it where you think that that's the only thing that you can do. I think that's where you have to kind of take a step back and just kind of look at it and just go, it's not. That's not who I am. That's not who they are. That's not all that they are. That's not all that I am. Et cetera, et cetera. It's one of those things where you have to kind of see that that's what they are right now, or that's a part of them, but there's many facets to them, just like there's many facets to you, just like life itself. So sometimes you find yourself in this kind of rut where you feel as though you're doing these things and you think, well, it's becoming a routine where all I'm doing is, drinking, smoking, sitting down, going here, doing this, hanging out with these people, being alone, being with people, finding yourself in a position where you think, well, this is the best I have, so why, as they say, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But just because it's not broke doesn't mean you can't improve. You can have, a bike that seems to be perfectly fine, but if you can get one that can take, more beating, if you would, now that you're, getting more into biking, or if you're getting into, working out and you're using certain types of equipment, and now you're starting to get higher in, your weights or whatever the case is. And again, this is in all types of regards. There's a certain level of, you're always going to want to upgrade, because that's something I think is a part of human nature, that we always want to be able to get better. Now, some people get lost and unfortunately take it in a path that is a little bit different. You know, driving themselves to a place where they think, well, the better I can get in terms of this will make me feel better, but it won't be good for me in the long run. So you don't have to feel as though this is something that has to, occupy your life. As it just said, there's nothing wrong with, just living your life. Um, so you have to understand that this is not the end. This is not where it, you know, stops. Everything has its flow. If you're someone who does, in this particular character's case, decides that it's time to start going for running it. Now I understand this is just GTA, so there's no level of needing to, maintain a certain type of physique or lifestyle, because it's not relevant to the game or to the aspect of it in any type of way. But this is still something about life. To break the third wall a little bit, I had to engage in this. I had to engage in this whole thing of running around the city and, making sure that everything has been edited to add any kind of things. Because there's a lot of moments in here that I had to take some things out and replace them with just, other things that I thought would kind of add elements to it. But even then, it's something where you have to look at it as I don't want to say motivation, but I guess commitment to these types of things. There's a certain element of life that I think you get to a point where you're like, well, I don't want to take this path and potentially end up putting myself on the wrong path, and I won't find that out until it's too late. That's I think something that I struggle with, and I know there's a lot of people that probably struggle with that same thing. And it's one of those things where you just have to kind of understand that everything that you do is going to be beneficial to you, and no one else is supposed to benefit from it. There's nothing that, if you do something not altruistic, but that's truly going to benefit you, it doesn't put any harm to anybody else. I'm not saying to go and get revenge, or to put somebody out in some type of vendetta or whatever the case is. I'm saying, like, if you want to go start running, do it. If you want to start working out, if you want to start doing certain things that are perceived better for you, that other people might feel like, oh, you're trying to be better than us, or what do you think, you're better than me? And it's like, that's why you have to kind of also reflect on the people that you have surrounding you, regardless of who that is. It doesn't matter if they're family, if they're friends you've had for a while, if they're friends that you've recently made and thought, well, this is, they seem this, that, or whatever. You have to understand that there's nothing wrong with remembering the good times and acknowledging that there were good times, but also acknowledging that there were bad times, and that it's better for yourself to just continually have good times. Now, obviously, there are things in life that you're going to come across that are going to occur outside of your control, that are not going to allow you to truly have good times all the time. Maybe you'll trip and fall, or maybe you'll cut your arm by accident, or somebody will cut you off, or again, these are just kind of things that I'm coming up with, but I'm sure you can come up with something that's more relevant to your life. That's going to be something that you can think to yourself, yeah, this is kind of annoying, or this is not something that I enjoy, or whatever the case is. But that doesn't mean that this, again, it's not the end. This isn't the end of your story. This isn't where everything stops. Like, it's just a moment, and you have to be able to kind of push past that. Um, like, even like I said, breaking the wall again. It's kind of like doing this right now. It feels a little odd because it's something that I'm not familiar with doing or something that I feel compelled to do. But I find myself doing these things for myself all the time, and I'm, always perusing the internet for all types of things in terms of things I'm curious about or things I haven't seen in a while, and then I come across things that maybe kind of put me in a position of like, damn, like it's unfortunate to find or realize that there are other people that are, I want to say, I don't want to say worse or in a worse opposition, but definitely are in a position where they feel as though they are lost, or that they have no option. Maybe unfortunately you didn't get involved with somebody, or you did get involved with somebody that your life has now changed drastically because now they're off having families, or you have a family that maybe you didn't really want, or isn't going the way you planned because you weren't ready, but you were trying to create this identity of independence, even though you didn't have any of the resources available, especially because of multiple factors that involve, just the society that we live in, and the idea that it's always kind of getting things as easily as they once were is not as relative. We have to, as a society, I think, in my opinion, we have to kind of understand that there is going to be those times where some people are not left behind, but are going to be stuck in the rearview mirror. Um, but that doesn't mean that they can't, you know, change their own place or where they are in life, just step by step. It's not, as they always say. I hate, I'm not as big of a cliche fan, but there's something to these adages that always make sense. Where they say that Rome was not built in a day, or the Great Wall wasn't built in a day, or whatever. But there's a reason, that that could be, you can say that about anything. Any building is not really built in a day. There's nothing that you can say is great that is built over time, or in a single day. It takes time. It takes, sometimes wasted effort that you feel as though it's like, oh, well, doing this, or as they say, delayed gratification, where you have, you're doing these things and it doesn't seem like anything's really paying off, and you put so much effort and time and dedication and da 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 da. And then you get to a certain point, you're like, I haven't really gotten anything. And it's like, well, you have. You've done certain things. You've changed certain routines of your life. So again, it's not saying that you can't still engage in smoking or drinking or whatever it is. Maybe it's hanging out with people even though you may not have the money for it, or hanging out with people even though you really don't feel comfortable being around them and stuff, but you're trying to see if it's something with you or something with them. It's one of those things where you have to kind of maintain who you are. And if the people or the things that are occurring to you make you feel as though you're having to change yourself or change who you are, but it's not for the better, then that's where the whole self-reflection, that's where the whole idea of having to kind of look inward and seeing, what am I allowing to occur, um, that's not allowing me to change. As I said, before, even this type of thing seems very, very odd to me. But I think, at the core of it all, that I think that there are people who may come across this and see, oh, okay, so it's not just a singular, I'm not just kind of alone in these types of situations. And not that I've ever had that genuine feeling, because it's always something where me, myself, I've always understood it as, I'm going to have to live my life however that may be. Now, of course, it's taking me some time to get to that point, but it is something where you do have to realize that you, everyone's running the path, but it's all at different paces. So we're not, like, you can't assume that your life is going to be the same as somebody else's, that just because you may share similar lives, or you live in the same area, or whatever the case is, that you're supposed to have a certain life, even if your parents are feeding you some bullshit that you have to do this or get this way or dress a certain way or talk a certain way or whatever. it's not, you know, it's not like if you don't do it, time is up. Like, people always say, life is very short. It's like sort of. Like I understand what they're saying by that, but to a certain degree, barring any type of, you know, thing that you can kind of understand, you have some kind of, unfortunate sickness, or you have some type of, you know, space that doesn't allow you to kind of spread your wings essentially. Like, you still have those days ahead of you. Even if it feels like, oh, well, I wasted today, and it's like, not really. Like, sure, there is a certain level of you are still wasting quote unquote days, um, but you you still have to take those days as like an understanding of like when you do change, when you do make that transition to that next step, those days are going to be something that you remember all the time. Like, oh, I remember the days when I was, like even in this video, sitting around watching TV and just getting high and just drinking, just, till I was, falling over myself or whatever the case is. And like, again, not that that's innately wrong, but if that's all you're doing, I mean, maybe try to look at other things, or add other things to it that could actually potentially change that that aspect. And I think there's a level of acceptance that you have to take within yourself. Like, this is something I'm allowing myself to do. I don't have to do anything that people are telling me to a certain degree. I mean, if you're younger, obviously there's a certain, you know, uh, the disadvantage you have because you have people who are older, whether it be parents, teachers, police, people of authority, whatever the case is, telling you that you have to, you know, do certain things or be certain places or whatever. But you have to look at it as, sure, this is now, but it's not forever. This is something where you have to understand it as, I still have control over my life, even if other people are kind of dictating certain elements of it for right now. Um, you have to accept that part of your life, but acknowledge that when you get older, when you get to a certain point, you're not going to have to worry about that stuff anymore. I still enjoy smoking and drinking, but I also enjoy, reading and, learning about new things and trying to acquire new skills or whatever the case is. So this whole thing is just basically an idea of just trying to expand on that to other people who, again, I've seen many stories of people, and I've seen just certain things like, reports or stories or whatever it is, that people are just feeling essentially like they're lost or that they don't have any kind of room. And it's like, I mean, to a certain degree, I guess, kind of don't, but it doesn't mean, again, that it's like you can't take it with stride. Um, that you can't just accept that unfortunately there are some things you can't turn back on, that you can't turn around. Um, but you have to be able to move forward. Not straight, particularly, because it doesn't mean you can go straight but end up going backwards, and it doesn't help anybody at all. But you have to continue moving forward. So, especially when it was, with COVID, that was something that I was coming to realize, that there was a lot of people who were kind of losing their minds a bit because they had to come to the realization, because of something that was out of their control, that they had to now kind of change their routine, change the distractions that were in their life, change the, aspects of their life that allowed them to get distracted and forget that, they have kids that are, not going to be listening to them or don't respect them as much or whatever the case is, or that they didn't live their life the way they wanted to because they were trying to, you know, I don't want to say abandon their parents' wishes, but they were trying to show their parents, like, oh, I'll do something different, or whatever the case is. And it's like, sure, that is something that you obviously, I think a lot of people, especially with like the current generation and, just past generations, I mean, honestly, it's probably been going on for a long time, where you've had people who've always been telling their, their children that they have to do this, they have to live this way, or whatever. And it's like, well, this is my life. If you didn't do that in your life, that sucks. If you did do it in your life, that's great. That doesn't mean that I have to do that, because then you're kind of making this claim that your path is the perfect path and anything else is essentially like wrong, which is a terrible thing to try to elude to other people, because there's no way to be able to fundamentally showcase that yours is perfect. Oh well, I've made about so much money, and then the question would become, okay, well, did your parents make as even more money than you, or make anywhere close to it? And if the answer is anything but yes, then the question ends up becoming back to, well, what about their parents? Like, if you have a long generation of people who are just exorbitantly rich or whatever the case is, that's fine. Or even people who are, constantly creating things, or, people with those big families and stuff like that, like the Octomom, who has like 8 children, whatever the case is. Now, if 7 of those kids end up just being regular people, quote unquote, it's, it doesn't mean that they failed. It just means that they're just living the life as they want to, because, there's a certain part of them that thinks, yeah, this is as great as I can be for now, and that's fine. And that's really the point of this first motivational Monday, I guess, is what I'm trying to go for. Um, is that it's fine just being where you are. If you want to change, that's fine too. But don't feel compelled to change because you think that other people are going to start to perceive you better, or that other people are finally going to start, showing you that level of respect, or whatever the hell it is that you're trying to create by doing these things. This video itself, I'm not really. It doesn't matter if it reaches one person, 100 people, 1,000 people. It doesn't really affect me, because I think the idea that I'm mainly into is that it's still going to interact. That it's something that even for myself has to be done, because again, it's something that I'm realizing that I'm changing stuff in my life, even if the people that I'm associated with, or people that I know, whether it be past, present, or potentially future, that I've seen, whatever that is, I know that there are certain aspects of life that they are kind of stuck with. And does that hurt me sometimes? I guess. I mean, it's unfortunate that I can't give them at least some of the understanding that I've taken from life, and be like, listen, like, you can do more. You know that you can do better. If you're choosing not to, that's fine, but you have to be content with that. And it's like, and that's part of, what I'm kind of recognizing, even from, like I said, from people that I know, from people that I've known in the past, to things that I see, on the internet, whatever the case is, especially from my fellow guys. It's just something that you have to understand, that, like, if you're fine where you're at, then be fine with that. There's nothing wrong with it. Even if everyone's like, oh, da, 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 even myself saying you can do better, you can do this, do whatever. If you're like, I don't really need to, I don't need to be this, this next whatever person you want to put in that's been recognized throughout time. I don't need to be the next T.S. Eliot, or the next, Bill Gates, or the next whatever. If you're fine just being Johnny, then that's fine. But again, you have to kind of keep to that. You have to maintain that commitment of, I'm fine with this routine that I have, working some job 9 to 5, making a good amount of money, but not much as I need, or as much as I would like, whatever the case is, that's fine. But you have to then live within that. If you want to change, if you want to expand, if you want to, grow, I guess, into something bigger, then take that as well. I've heard that a lot, where it's like you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that's kind of where it starts. You have to accept that, this routine that you have, or whatever the case is great, and that you're fine with it, and it's worked for however long it's been, years, months, weeks, doesn't matter. But eventually, either you'll kind of face this existential crisis, essentially. You'll come to terms with it, that it's either beneficial for you to keep doing this, or that you'll understand that it could be potentially harming you, because you know that you can do better. You know that there's something greater for you, even if it means getting another position in that job, or making more creative things that people may not be so, whatever the case is, or too into, or whatever the case. Um, so the main idea is that if you're fine where you're at, be fine with that. Don't feel as though that because of the people that you associate with or the people that you're interacting with, you have to sit within this kind of stuck position, um, because you feel as though like if you change or if you try to upgrade, from having a regular bike to having a better bike, that somehow that means something worse. Um, whatever the case is, just kind of focus on you, because at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live your life, not anybody else, not your family, not your friends, not your coworkers, not your, authority figures, all that stuff. No one else is going to, people can give you input, even myself, like you don't, whatever the case is, even after all of this, and you're just like, who gives a shit? It's like, that's fine. It doesn't, like, it doesn't really affect me. It's really only you that gets affected. So if you think that you're fine where you're at, then there's nothing wrong with that. But it's something where people can give you all types of advice or give you their opinions and say, oh, maybe you should do this or you can come here or do da, and that kind of floods you with this idea of like, well, maybe I'm doing things wrong. Maybe they do know better. It's like, yeah, sort of. I mean, yeah, they do because they may be older or maybe they've had experiences that are very, very uniquely different to yours, but that doesn't mean that they are the go-to person for everything and anything. It just means that they might have some kind of insight into something that maybe could be something of like a heated warning of, oh, don't, as Michael Jackson says, don't break no hearts and stuff like that. Um, again, you don't want to get involved with somebody that might be too, toxic or chaotic, guy or girl, doesn't really matter. You don't want to be involved with, people that associate with, people who are into, maybe scamming people or people who are into, constantly lying or whatever the case is. You don't want to be associated with a friend group of people because they're making you feel like you have to act a certain way, because unfortunately, that's the other side of this, is that, their life may not be as in control as yours might be, but you don't see that. Um, so their life is kind of taken away from them, and in order for them to feel some type of, I don't want to say control or kind of, solace, they kind of do that with other people. So, again, it's something that you can't stop. You can't, like, unless they've done something, actually kind of, I would say evil, or, whatever the case is, something that makes you feel like, maybe they're not meant to be in my life. And again, this could be family, friends, it doesn't matter. Anybody that you put into like a category of like, oh, well, I respect their opinion, or I want them to have a good view of me. And it's like, if they end up not being the best, there's millions of other people that exist, especially with the way that we have the internet now. And unfortunately, a part of that is that, there are some people that are in different states or different cities that you may not have easy access to, because you don't have the means, whether financial or physical, to get there. But you do have the ability to see that there are other people that you can have this interaction with from the human understanding and say, okay, they understand that life is hard. I understand that life is hard, but we refuse to make each other's lives hard. We try to help each other as best as we can. Um, so if you feel as though you, you have to kind of change your routine, but not for yourself, I would say again, look inward and think about the people that are kind of occupying your time and your thoughts, if you would, and just make sure that you're doing what's best for you, um, at the end of the day, because again, you have to live your life. No one else will. And if you're constantly trying to please other people or be that person that people can be like, oh, we're happy to have them around, it's like now you're living the life they want, not the life that you want. And obviously, it has to be within reason, because again, if you're feeling as though you want to go and commit certain acts against other humans because it feels better for you, I mean, that's where you kind of have to now again look inward and reflect, well, why am I letting these people get me so, agitated or frustrated or feeling this level of sadness or whatever the case is? You can just simply remove them or kind of just no longer have them be a part of your life. And if they kind of keep trying to break that barrier, even though you have them at a distance, where you can still say hi, you can still be civil, you can still be, interact with them to a certain capacity. But if they're constantly trying to break that barrier, you can either, tell them up front, or you can have that thing where you're just like, hey, I'm always busy, kind of have this idea of we were friends or we were, in good company, but now I have to move on. It doesn't seem like you want to. So, we'll always be friends, but I have to do this for myself. If they want to take along the ride, that's on them. If they don't, that's still on them, because again, you have to focus on what you're doing, and people will look at it and say, "Oh, you're being selfish," or you don't care about other people. And it's like, no, I actually care about other people a lot, so much that I'm trying to better myself, so that when I do interact with other people, I'm not creating some kind of unnecessary tension or some negative interaction where they have to walk away from that feeling some type of way, because some people may not take that idea of just looking inward. They'll take it upon themselves to let their emotions dictate their actions and feel as though that's a justification for whatever they decide to do, as a I guess as reasoning, for what they decide, or whatever the case is. Like, so just bottom line, this whole thing, because I feel like I've kind of rambled, and again, this is the first time I've done something like this, so I'm just kind of getting the feel for it, and I enjoy it. But it's something that I want to kind of wrap up as best I can. The one thing that I guess I want to make kind of, kind of like I said, bottom lining, is that life is constantly changing. It's always going to be changing. There's going to be things that you don't have control over, but there's many things that you do have control over, mainly being how you react to these changes. So if you feel like you want to change your life because you think it's going to make things better for you in the long run, and possibly even the people around you, because they'll see that you're, whatever, happy with yourself, I mean, like I said, go for it, because obviously there's nothing wrong with change. But if you feel like you're doing it because you think that that is what others want you to do, I'm not saying don't do it because of that. I'm saying you have to find the reasoning for why you want to change within yourself. And then when you finally do make the change, see how those people react. Whether, again, be the family, friends, anything in between, whatever that is. And again, don't feel like you have to be stuck in this position with these people, because partially they may enjoy that as well. And that could be something that affects your ability to change, because they don't want to face that reality of their own, life, because you're changing your life for the better. So just focus on yourself. Yes, it gets kind of lonely sometimes, but just understand that there are other people that are doing the same thing or in the same position. And although you can have a feeling about that, don't let that change your ability to keep going forward. Um, it's definitely going to be better for you to do what's best for you. Because again, you don't want to be living the life that other people are deciding for you. Because if you're living their life, then who's living yours? And then they're just kind of feeding off of that ability to kind of control you, however that may be. So just focus on your own life. Still interact and still have that people of, kind of give you a distraction from life, that you will benefit from. Don't feel as though you have to constantly, as they say, the fear of missing out. Don't feel like you have to constantly go here and there and do all these things for other people. But then when you want to do a certain thing, they kind of meet you with hesitation. They're like, oh, I don't want to go here, or I don't want to see this, or whatever. And it's like, well, I'm always going and, all this other stuff. And it's like, well, that doesn't mean anything, because again, you can do it by yourself. You can find people that, are there, that maybe enjoy it as you, with you, just like you do, whatever the case is. Um, but again, you have to just live the life that you would prefer. And If it means that you only have a handful of people that you interact with, that's fine too. I think honestly, especially if you watch a lot of TV, as I have in the past, a lot of the times you find that, the main characters or whatever usually have like a handful of people that they find that common interaction with. Two or three good friends, and then maybe two or three great friends, but not as comparable to the other ones or whatever the case is that the main character has or whatever. Even Seinfeld, there's like four main people in that whole show. Jerry's being one of them, but then you have Elaine, George, and Kramer. He doesn't like Newman, but Newman's all right. There's nothing really wrong. Newman's just kind of annoying. But that's what I mean. That's just an example. Like, there's always that idea that you can always interact with lots of people, but not everyone's going to be your friend. Not everyone's going to be in your life consistently. It's going to be something where you have to kind of measure your own time. You have to manage your own time, I guess, as best as you can, and find the people that you want to have those moments with more. And if they end up not showing that same thing back, you can just take what you had and then move on. Because again, now you're living into this perpetual cycle of trying to, do they like me? Do they want me to be a friend? Are we friends? It's like, you don't really need that. Because again, as as I've always assumed, I've always seen it this way. We were born alone. You will die alone. Even if you have someone, even if you have, 50 people in the hospital with you on your last couple days, no one's going to feel it but you. Um, so they'll feel it by proxy of your passing, whatever, but you're the only one who's going to have those moments that you're going to be feeling lastly. So you have to kind of accept that and just go, these people are great, but I know I can do better. Or, they're fine, but they're not fine for me, whatever the case is. Maybe they're rude to waiters, or they're very impatient, or, whatever the case is. I'm not saying that you have to find this one thing and go, oh, that's it, I'm done. Like, you have to kind of have a little bit of a understanding that you're not perfect and neither are they, but you still have to, again, live the life that you have and focus on your stuff. And if there are people that are kind of bringing you down or not kind of building you up, just remember them for what they were and just move on. And you don't have to make any kind of crazy, kind of proclamation, or something where you're like, we're no longer friends, like, because that's, now you're just asking, now you're just kind of looking for drama, which is not beneficial to anybody in any capacity. You can just kind of do the, as they say, the Irish goodbye, where you just leave without saying a word, and that's as far as it goes. So if you enjoy this, if you like this, if it helped you in any type of way, again, I feel like I'm rambling, but I'm just trying to get familiar with this type of thing. Do whatever, you comment, leave your stories, tell me how it is, feed your darkness to me. That's kind of what I'm going for, is I've accepted that. I've always seen myself as one with the darkness, because you can't be afraid of the dark. You have to kind of be able to move within it, especially when we don't really know what the future is. We're all part of the unknown. But I've learned to kind of be at one with it, so I don't need to feel like, oh, I can't see in the dark. I see perfectly in the dark, in this kind of analogy. I do well, because I know that I'm not worried, because I know that I will always be doing what's best for me. And I assume others will do the same. So again, if you like this, if you don't like it, I mean, I guess I don't really care, but leave your comments, leave your likes, tell your stories, feed your darkness to me, and, I guess I'll see you in the next one. But this has been The Darkness.